The hospital ship Biko moved slowly through the darkness of space. It was a big ship, painted white with bright red medical symbols on every side. These symbols told everyone in the galaxy the same thing. This ship carried no weapons. This ship meant no harm. This ship only healed the broken. Captain Park Tai-ho stood on the bridge and watched the stars pass by. He was 58 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face full of old scars. His left arm ended just below the elbow, replaced by a metal prosthetic that gleamed under the ship's lights. He had lost that arm 15 years ago on a moon called Raxes IV. He still remembered the sound of the explosion. He still remembered crawling through the mud to save his men. Now he commanded a hospital ship. Some people thought it was a quiet job. Those people were fools. The Biko carried 3,400 patients. Every single one of them was a soldier. Some were missing arms or legs. Some had burns covering half their bodies. Some had pieces of metal still inside them, too dangerous to remove. They came from the Nexari border campaign, a brutal war that had lasted 3 years. They were going home to Earth to heal, but healing took time. And space was not safe. Dr. Kim Soo-bin walked onto the bridge with a tablet in her hands. She was in her 40s, with tired eyes and steady hands. Before she became a surgeon, she had served 3 combat tours. She knew how to use a rifle. She knew how to stop bleeding with nothing but her fingers and willpower. Now she spent her days putting soldiers back together. "Captain," she said, "we have a problem." Tai-ho did not turn around. "Tell me." 3 patients died last night. Infections we could not stop. She paused. "And we are running low on synthetic blood. We need to reach the station soon." "We will reach it in 4 days," Tai-ho said. "Can you make it work?" Soo-bin nodded slowly. "I always do." She left the bridge, and Tai-ho returned to watching the stars. He thought about the soldiers sleeping in the medical bays below. He thought about the young ones who screamed in their sleep, haunted by memories of battle. He thought about the old ones who lay silent, staring at nothing, waiting to feel whole again. They trusted him to bring them home. He would not fail them. In Medical Bay 7, Sergeant Major Lee Dong-hyun sat up in his bed and looked around. He was 52 years old, built like a stone wall, with hands that had killed more enemies than he could count. Shrapnel had torn through his chest 2 months ago. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. He did not feel lucky. He felt restless. Across from him, Lieutenant Yoon Han-ah floated in a regeneration tank. Only her face was visible above the blue liquid. Both of her legs were growing back, slowly cell by cell. She had been a mech pilot before a Nexari cannon ripped her machine apart. She had dragged herself 3 kilometers through enemy territory before rescue arrived. She was 29 years old and had already died twice on the operating table. Her eyes opened, and she looked at Dong-hyun through the glass. "You are staring again, old man," she said. Her voice came through a small speaker on the tank. "I am bored," Dong-hyun replied. "There is nothing to do on this ship. You could rest. Like the doctors told you, rest is for the dead." Hana laughed, and bubbles rose around her face. "You are dramatic." In the corner of the room, Corporal Baek Ji-ho worked on a small device with his one good eye. He was 24 years old, thin and quiet. A sniper's round had taken his right eye on his first deployment. Now he wore a black patch over the empty socket. But his left eye was sharp, and his mind was sharper. He was a communication specialist, one of the best in the fleet. "Something is wrong," Ji-ho said suddenly. Dong-hyun looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I am picking up strange signals, encrypted, military grade." Ji-ho frowned at his device. "Someone is watching us." Before Dong-hyun could respond, the ship shook. Alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. On the bridge, Tejo gripped the railing as his crew shouted reports. Contact. Large vessel dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They are locking weapons on us. Captain, they are jamming our communications. Tejo's face did not change. He had seen this before. He knew what was coming. Show me, he said. The main screen flickered, and a ship appeared. It was ugly and brutal, covered in spikes and scars. Tejo recognized the design immediately. Varax, a slaver species known across the galaxy for cruelty and greed. They attacked weak targets and sold their prisoners to the highest bidder. They had chosen the Biko because it was a hospital ship, because it had no weapons, because it was full of wounded, helpless humans. Tejo almost smiled. A message came through the speakers. A deep, growling voice filled the bridge. Human vessel, you will surrender. You will open your doors. If you resist, we will kill everyone on board. You have 1 minute. The crew looked at their captain. Fear was in their eyes. They were medical staff, not warriors. They did not know how to fight, but Tejo knew something they did not. He knew who was sleeping in those medical bays. He knew what those broken bodies could still do. Open the doors, he said calmly. Let them in. His first officer stared at him. Captain, trust me. Tejo's eyes were cold and hard. Let them in. And tell Dr. Kim to prepare for visitors. The doors opened. The Varax raiders began their approach. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Varax boarding pods hit the Biko like metal fists. They punched through the hull and locked tight. Smoke filled the corridors as doors hissed open and the raiders poured inside. There were 200 of them. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, covered in dark green scales and thick muscle. Their eyes were yellow and hungry. Their teeth were sharp. They carried plasma rifles and shock batons, weapons made for hurting and capturing. Warlord Scrath led them. He was the biggest of all, nearly 8 feet tall, with scars covering his face and a necklace of teeth around his neck. Each tooth came from a different species he had conquered. He wanted to add human teeth to his collection. Move fast, Scrath growled to his warriors. Take the healthy ones first. Kill anyone who fights back. The Vorax spread through the ship like a disease. They kicked open doors and dragged people into the corridors. Nurses screamed. Doctors raised their hands in surrender. The raiders laughed at how easy it was done in Medical Bay 7. The doors burst open. 4 Varax warriors stomped inside, their boots heavy on the floor. They looked around at the beds, at the machines, at the broken humans lying still. Sergeant Major Dong Hyan did not move. He lay in his bed with his eyes half closed, watching. His heart was calm. His breathing was slow. He had been in situations like this before. Lieutenant Hana floated in her tank, her face peaceful. She looked like she was sleeping, but her eyes were open just a crack, tracking every movement. Corporal Jiho sat in his corner, his device hidden under his blanket. His fingers moved slowly, silently, typing commands into the ship's system. One of the Varax walked to Dong Hyan's bed and poked him with a shock baton. This one looks strong. He will sell well. Dong Hyan said nothing. He did not even blink. The Varax laughed and moved on. In the main corridor, Warlord Scrath walked slowly, enjoying himself. He looked at the humans pressed against the walls, their faces pale with fear. He smelled their terror. It was delicious. A nurse stood in his path. Her name was Cho Yunbai. She was 35 years old, small and quiet. Her hands were behind her back. Please, she said, her voice shaking. Please do not hurt the patients. They are very sick. Scrath leaned down until his face was close to hers. His breath was hot and rotten. Sick humans sell cheap, but they still sell. Yunbai lowered her eyes. Yes, I understand. Scrath pushed past her and continued walking. He did not see her pull the plasma cutter from behind her back. He did not see the cold look in her eyes. Bai had served as a combat medic for 8 years. She had killed enemy soldiers with her bare hands while saving her own. She knew how to wait. She knew how to strike, but not yet. The time was not right. Scrath reached Medical Bay 12, the largest bay on the ship. 300 patients lay in beds that stretched from wall to wall. Some had missing limbs. Some had tubes running into their bodies. Some were wrapped in bandages from head to toe. Scrath walked between the beds, looking at the humans like they were products in a market. He stopped next to a young woman in a wheelchair. It was Lieutenant Hannah. They had moved her from the tank for transport. "Look at this," Scrath said loudly. "No legs, useless." He kicked her wheelchair, and she almost fell. Hannah looked up at him. Her face showed no fear. "Do you know what a combat veteran is?" she asked. Scrath frowned. "What?" "A combat veteran," Hannah repeated. "Do you know what that means?" Scrath's yellow eyes narrowed. This small, broken human was not afraid. That made him angry. He raised his hand and hit her across the face. The sound echoed through the silent bay. Hannah's head snapped to the side. Blood ran from her lip. But when she looked back at Scrath, she was smiling. "Wrong answer," she whispered. Scrath opened his mouth to speak, but then he noticed something strange. The room had changed. The patients were no longer lying still. They were sitting up. They were watching him. 300 pairs of human eyes, cold and hard and completely without fear. The monitors began to beep faster. Heart rates rising. Not from fear, from anticipation. One old soldier, Master Sergeant No Young Ho, slowly pulled the breathing tube from his throat. He was 60 years old, his lungs damaged from poison gas. But his hands were steady. His eyes were clear. "You made a mistake," Young Ho said, his voice rough like gravel. "A very big mistake." Scrath stepped back. Something was wrong. This was not how prey was supposed to act. The ship's speakers crackled. Captain Taiho's voice filled every room, every corridor, every corner of the Beak-Ho. "All hands. Condition black." The words were simple, but every human on the ship understood. These are not protected civilians. Rules of engagement are lifted. Scrath looked around wildly. The humans were moving now, pulling tubes from their arms, climbing out of beds, grabbing anything they could use as weapons. "What is this?" Scrath demanded. "You are wounded. You are helpless." Hannah reached down and locked the wheels of her chair. Then she looked up at the warlord with eyes that had seen death many times. "We are soldiers," she said. "And you just locked yourself inside a ship with 3,000 of us." The lights flickered. The doors slammed shut. And somewhere in the ship, the first Varax warrior screamed. The hunt had begun. But the Varax were not the hunter's dog. They were the prey. The first Varax died in Medical Bay 7. He never saw it coming. Sergeant Major Dong Hien moved faster than anyone expected. One moment he was lying in bed. The next moment he was behind the guard, his foretube wrapped tight around the alien's throat. The Varax clawed at the plastic line, cutting into his scales, but Dong Hien did not let go. His arms burned with pain from his wounds, but he did not stop. The Varax fell. Dong Hien took his weapon. "Jiho," he said quietly. "Talk to me." Corporal Jiho was already working. His fingers flew across his device, connecting to the ship's main computer. "I have control of the internal systems. Doors, lights, air vents, everything." "Good. Lock down Section 4. Fill Corridor 9 with fire suppression gas." "Done." In Corridor 9, 5 Varax warriors suddenly found themselves trapped. White gas poured from the ceiling, filling their lungs. They coughed and stumbled, blind and confused. They did not see the shadows moving toward them. Private Wang Chi-tae was 23 years old and missing his right arm. The doctors had given him a metal prosthetic while he waited for a biological replacement. It was heavy and ugly, and not designed for fighting. He did not care. Ki-tae swung his metal arm like a club. The first Virax went down with a broken skull. The second tried to raise his weapon, but Ki-tae was faster. He grabbed the alien's throat with his flesh hand and squeezed, until something snapped. 3 more soldiers came out of the gas behind him. One had only one eye. One was missing both ears. One had burns covering half his body. None of them hesitated. The Virax in Corridor 9 stopped screaming after 40 seconds. In Medical Bay 12. Chaos erupted. The 300 patients rose as one. Some could barely walk. Some were still connected to machines. But they all moved with the same cold purpose. A Virax warrior fired his plasma rifle into the crowd. 2 humans fell, but 5 more took their place. They grabbed the alien's arms and pulled him down. Fists and elbows rained down on his scaled body. By the time they were done, there was not much left. Master Sergeant Young-ho walked slowly through the bay, his damaged lungs wheezing with each breath. A Virax came at him with a shock baton. Young-ho stepped aside, grabbed the alien's wrist, and twisted. The baton fell. Then Young-ho's hands found the alien's throat. "You should have picked a different ship," Young-ho whispered as the life faded from the Virax's yellow eyes. Nurse Yunbai moved through the corridors like a ghost. Her plasma cutter hummed in her hand, the blade glowing bright blue. 2 Virax guards stood at the entrance to the surgery wing. They were laughing about something, not paying attention. Eun-Bai did not give them time to stop laughing. The first one fell with a hole in his chest. The second turned to see her, eyes wide with surprise. Her cutter took him across the throat before he could raise his weapon. She stepped over their bodies and kept walking. In the engine room, a group of Virax had gathered to hold their position. They knew something was wrong. They could hear screaming on their communication devices. Their brothers were dying, and they did not understand why. Lieutenant Hana understood. She had found a maintenance exosuit in a storage closet. It was designed for heavy lifting, not combat. The metal frame wrapped around her body and gave her legs she could use again. She was slow and clumsy, but she did not need to be fast. The door to the engine room exploded inward. Hana walked through the smoke, the exosuit hissing and clanking with each step. The Virax opened fire. Plasma bolts hit the metal frame and bounced away. Hana reached the first Virax and grabbed him with the suit's mechanical arms. She squeezed. The alien screamed. Then he stopped screaming. "Who's next?" she asked, looking at the others. They ran. She chased them. Throughout the ship, the same story played out again and again. The Virax had expected easy prey. They found something else entirely. These humans were not civilians. They were soldiers. Every single one of them had faced death before. Every single one of them had killed before. Their bodies were broken, but their spirits were not. A soldier with no legs pulled himself across the floor and strangled. A Virax from behind, a soldier who was blind, used only sound to guide his blade into an alien's heart. A soldier who was dying from radiation. Poisoning used his last minutes of strength to crush a Virax's skull against the wall. They fought with fists, with tools, with pieces of broken equipment. They fought with medical instruments designed to save lives, now used to end them. They fought with the cold efficiency of people who had nothing left to lose. Corporal Jiho watched it all through the ship's cameras. He guided the soldiers, telling them where the Virax were hiding. He locked doors to trap the aliens. He opened doors to let the humans through. He was the brain, and the soldiers were the fists. Donghayan, Jiho said into his communicator. There are 15 Varaks trapped in Cargo Bay 2. They are trying to reach their shuttle. Keep them there, Donghayan replied. We are coming. 20 soldiers gathered outside Cargo Bay 2. Some were in wheelchairs. Some leaned on crutches. Some were carried by their brothers and sisters. But they all had weapons now, taken from the dead. Donghayan looked at them. These were his people. These were the ones who had bled and suffered and refused to die. No prisoners, he said simply. They opened the door. The Varaks in Cargo Bay 2 lasted less than 3 minutes. On the bridge, Captain Taeho listened to the reports coming in. The numbers were beautiful. 100 Varaks dead. 150. 180. Dr. Subin stood beside him, a plasma pistol in her steady surgeon's hands. How many did we lose? Taeho asked. 12, Subin replied. So far. Taeho nodded slowly. 12 human lives for 180 alien slavers. It was not a fair trade. No trade would be fair. But it was the best they could do. Find the warlord, Taeho said. I want him alive. He had questions for Scrath. And after that, he had a message to send to the galaxy. Warlord Scrath ran through the corridors of the Biko, and for the first time in his long life, he felt fear. The screams of his warriors filled his ears. 200 fighters had boarded the ship. Now he could count the survivors on his fingers. Everywhere he turned, there were bodies. Green blood stained the white walls. His brothers lay broken on the floor, killed by creatures that should have been helpless. This is impossible, he growled. They are wounded. They are sick. How are they doing this? He did not understand. He could not understand. The Voraks had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. They were strong. They were brutal. They always won. But these humans did not fight like normal prey. They did not beg for mercy. They did not run away. They moved like machines, silent and efficient. They killed without hesitation and without emotion. Even the ones who could barely stand found ways to end Varak's lives. Scrath reached a junction and stopped. 3 paths stretched before him. He could hear movement in all directions. They were hunting him. They were hurting him like an animal. He chose the left path and ran. Captain Taeho walked calmly through the ship, following the trail of destruction. He stepped over Varak's bodies without looking down. He had seen worse. He had done worse. His prosthetic arm hung at his side. It looked simple, just a metal replacement for flesh and bone. But Taeho had modified it years ago. Inside the forearm was a blade made of compressed carbon, sharper than any knife in the galaxy. He had used it 3 times before. He would use it again today. Jiho, he said into his communicator. Where is he? Heading for the escape pods on Deck 4, Jiho replied. I have sealed the main route. He will have to go through the medical storage area. Good. Keep him moving. I will meet him there. Taeho walked faster. Scrath burst into the medical storage area and stopped. The room was full of shelves holding supplies, medicines, equipment. Shadows stretched between the rows. He could hide here. He could wait for rescue, but rescue would not come. His ship was still outside, but Jiho had taken control of its communication systems. No signals were getting through. No one knew what was happening on the Biko. Scrath moved deeper into the room, his weapon raised. His yellow eyes searched the darkness. Come out, human, he called. Face me like a warrior. Silence answered him. Then a voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You want to face me? Very well. The lights came on. Taeho stood at the end of the aisle, alone. He was not a big man. He was old. He was missing an arm. He carried no visible weapon. Scrath laughed. You? You are the one hunting me? A broken old human? Tejo did not answer. He just started walking toward Scrath. Stay back. Scrath raised his plasma rifle and fired. Tejo moved. The bolt passed through empty air. He kept walking. Scrath fired again. And again. Each shot missed as Tejo shifted and dodged with movements that seemed almost lazy. How? Scrath stepped backward. How are you doing that? Tejo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I have been fighting since before you were born, Warlord. I have killed enemies on 20 different worlds. I have survived wounds that should have ended me a dozen times. He was close now. Very close. You came to my ship. Tejo continued. You threatened my people. You thought we were weak because we were wounded. But let me tell you something. His prosthetic arm moved. The hidden blade slid out with a soft hiss, gleaming in the light. A wounded wolf is still a wolf. Scrath swung his rifle like a club. Tejo ducked under it and drove the blade into the alien's leg. Scrath screamed and fell to one knee. His weapon clattered away. We are soldiers, Tejo said, standing over him. Every person on this ship has served humanity. Every person has bled for their people. You attacked a hospital ship, yes, but you forgot to ask who was inside it. Scrath clutched his wounded leg. Green blood poured between his fingers. This violates galactic law. Hospital ships are protected. You are non-combatants. Tejo crouched down so he could look into Scrath's eyes. We are non-combatants. We follow the rules. We carry no weapons. We harm no one. He pressed the blade against Scrath's throat. But you attacked us first. And every soul on this ship has already spent their lives learning how to kill. The only thing defenseless about us was your intelligence. Dr. Su Bin appeared at the end of the aisle. Her hands were red with blood that was not her own. Behind her stood Lieutenant Hana in her exosuit, Sergeant Major Donghayan, and a dozen other soldiers. Captain, Su Bin said, the last of them are dead. We have won. Tejo nodded slowly. He looked back at Scrath. What? What will you do with me? The warlord asked. His voice was weak now, afraid. I am going to send a message, Tejo replied. To every slaver, every pirate, every creature in this galaxy that thinks humans are easy prey. He stood up and stepped back. The message is you. They dragged Scrath to the airlock. They sealed him inside. Then they opened the outer door. The vacuum of space took him. His body would drift among the stars, frozen and broken. Other ships would find him. Other species would see what happened to him, and they would understand. Hours later, the Biko sent a signal to the nearest human station. The message was simple. Hospital ship Biko reporting. We were attacked by Virax slavers. 200 enemy combatants neutralized. Requesting escort for remainder of journey. All patients secure. The station commander read the message 3 times before he believed it. How many soldiers do they have on board? He asked his officer. None, sir. It is a hospital ship. They only have medical staff and wounded patients. The commander looked at the message again. 200 enemy combatants neutralized. By wounded patients. He shook his head slowly. Someone remind me never to attack a human hospital ship. On the Biko, Captain Tejo stood in Medical Bay 12. The bodies of the fallen humans had been gathered and covered with white sheets. 3 crew members. 9 patients. 12 lives lost. Tejo looked at each one. He memorized their faces. He would remember them forever. Rest now, he whispered. We held the line. Behind him, the survivors began the long work of healing again. But this time, they healed with pride. They had been tested, and they had not been found wanting. The wolves had shown their teeth. 3 months passed. The story of the Biko spread across the galaxy like fire. At first, no one believed it. A hospital ship defeating 200 Varax raiders? Wounded humans killing trained warriors with their bare hands. It sounded like propaganda. It sounded like a fairy tale. Then the evidence arrived. Video recordings from the ship's cameras. Reports from the rescue vessels that found the Varax bodies floating in space. Medical records showing the wounds of the soldiers who fought. Everything was true. The galaxy had to face an uncomfortable truth. Humans were more dangerous than anyone had realized. On the Galactic Council station, diplomats from 100 species gathered to discuss the incident. The hall was full of whispers and worried looks. Many of them had thought of humans as soft creatures. Good at science. Good at medicine. Good at talking. Not good at fighting. They had been wrong. Ambassador Moon Sora stood before the council. She was 50 years old, with silver hair and calm eyes. She had served in the human military for 20 years before becoming a diplomat. She still carried herself like a soldier. A Krellian diplomat raised his hand. He was a tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms. Ambassador Moon, we have questions about the Biko incident. Of course, Sora replied. Ask. Your wounded, defeated, trained Varax warriors. How is this possible? The soldiers on that ship were missing limbs. They were sick. They were helpless. Sora smiled slightly. Respectfully, delegate, that is where you are wrong. Wrong? They were hospital patients. They were veterans. Sora let the word hang in the air. Every human on that ship had served in combat. Many had served for decades. They knew how to fight. They knew how to kill. Their bodies were wounded, yes, but their minds were not. The Krellian leaned forward. But surely the injuries limited their abilities? Let me explain something about humans, Sora said. When we are hurt, we do not become weaker. We become more determined. We learn to fight with what we have. A human with 1 arm learns to fight with 1 arm. A human with no legs finds another way to move. We adapt. We overcome. We never stop. She looked around the council chamber, meeting the eyes of every species. The Varax thought they found easy prey. They found 3,000 soldiers who had already faced death and won. They found people who had nothing left to fear. They found humans. She paused. A wounded human is still human. And humans do not forget how to fight. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the whispers began again, louder this time. But the tone had changed. Where there had been curiosity before, now there was something else. Respect, and perhaps a little fear. In the months that followed, strange things happened across the galaxy. Varax slave ships changed their routes to avoid human space. Pirates who had once preyed on human vessels suddenly found other targets. Even species that had never heard of Earth began to share stories about the humans, who turned their hospital ship into a weapon. The story grew with each telling. Some versions said the humans had secret weapons. Others said they were genetically modified super soldiers. The truth was simpler and more frightening. They were just humans. Regular humans who refused to give up. On Earth, the crew of the Biko became heroes. Captain Tejo received the highest military honors, though he refused to give speeches or appear on news broadcasts. He said the real heroes were the ones who did not come back. Dr. Subin returned to surgery. She saved 300 more lives in the next year alone. When reporters asked about the battle, she always said the same thing. I am a healer first. But I will protect my patients by any means necessary. Sergeant Major Dong Hyan finally healed from his wounds. He was offered a promotion and a desk job. He refused. He went back to the front lines instead. He said, sitting still made him restless. Lieutenant Hana got her new legs. She walked again, then ran. then returned to piloting mechs. She was faster than before, driven by something she could not explain. A new call sign was Phoenix. She rose from the ashes. Corporal Jiho was recruited by military intelligence. His ability to hack systems and coordinate battles from the shadows made him valuable. He still wore his eye patch. He said it reminded him of what he had survived. Nurse Yunbai continued her work on hospital ships, but she also started training other medical staff in combat techniques. Just in case, Master Sergeant Young Ho died peacefully in his sleep 6 months after the battle. His damaged lungs finally gave out. At his funeral, 200 soldiers came to pay respects. They said he died as he lived, quietly, without complaint, with his duty done. The Biko itself became famous. The ship was repaired and returned to service. But now it had a new nickname, the Wolf Den. Enemies knew to stay away. 1 year after the incident, the ship received a new batch of wounded soldiers. They were fresh from a border conflict, carrying wounds of body and mind. They limped through the corridors, looking for their assigned beds. A young private named Han Min-soo walked slowly through Medical Bay 12. He was 19 years old, with fresh bandages wrapped around his chest. He had survived his first battle by luck alone, and the experience had left him shaken. He found his bed and sat down. The soldier in the next bed was older, maybe 50, with scars on his hands and a calm expression. "First time on the Biko?" the older soldier asked. "Yes," Min-soo replied. "Is it true? What they say about this ship?" The older soldier smiled. It was Sergeant Major Dong Hyan. He had returned for another tour, carrying new wounds from new battles. "What do they say?" Min-soo swallowed. "They say the patients here killed 200 Varaks. They say this ship is cursed for anyone who attacks it." Dong Hyan laughed softly. "Not cursed, just full of people who refuse to die." He reached under his pillow and pulled out a small metal object. It was a Varak's tooth, taken from one of the raiders. "This is what we are," Dong Hyan said. "Wolves dressed as lambs. The enemy sees our bandages and our wheelchairs and thinks we are weak. But we are still soldiers. We are still dangerous. Never forget that." Min-soo stared at the tooth for a long moment. Then he looked around the bay. He saw the other patients watching him. Old soldiers and young ones. Men and women. All of them wounded. All of them broken in some way. But none of them looked helpless. None of them looked afraid. Min-soo sat up straighter. For the first time since his injury, he felt something other than fear. He felt pride. "I understand," he said quietly. Dong Hyan nodded and put the tooth away. "Good. Now rest. We have a long journey home." The Biko activated its engines and began to move. Stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. Inside, 3,000 wolves settled in for the trip. Somewhere in the galaxy, a Varak's commander looked at his navigation charts. The human hospital ship was moving through his sector. His crew wanted to attack. "No," the commander said firmly. "We stay away from that one." "But sir, it is just a hospital ship. No weapons." The commander turned to face his crew. His yellow eyes were hard. "Did you not hear the stories? That ship is death. Leave it alone." The crew obeyed. The Vorak ship turned away and found a different path. On the Biko, Captain Taiho stood on the bridge and watched the stars. He thought about the friends he had lost. He thought about the friends he had saved. He thought about the enemies who had learned to fear his ship. "Captain," his first officer said, "we will reach Earth in 6 days." "Good," Taiho replied. "Let our people rest. They have earned it." He turned and walked to his quarters. On the wall hung a simple plaque with 12 names. The ones who had fallen. The ones who would not be forgotten. Taiho touched the plaque gently. "We are still here," he whispered. "We will always be here." Outside, the stars kept burning, and the hospital ship Biko carried its cargo of wolves through the endless dark, heading home.